In today's episode, we're going to talk to Sarah. She's a business coach and a neuro language coach. If you don't know too much about neuro language coaching, then listen to this episode. Hello, Sarah.
Hello. Hi.
Let's start by you telling us a bit about you.
How I became an English teacher. Well, it's quite interesting, really, because at university, my original degree was actually in psychology, so not in teaching at all. In fact, I remember being at school and thinking, I'm going to end up being a teacher, but I really don't want to be a teacher because the thought of teaching in a school filled me full of dread. So it was sort of in my mind, but I was trying so hard not to do that. So anyway, I went to university, studied psychology. Like many people who go to university and study psychology, you have to specialize after that. But I wasn't sure where I wanted to specialize. Probably something related to educational psychology. That's something that I found quite interesting when I was doing the course. But in the meantime, when I was trying to decide what to do after I'd graduated, when I should have been getting a job, I thought, why not travel overseas? Many people in the UK, take a gap year after university, do a bit of teaching abroad. It's not always taken so seriously. It's just something to do for a while. So I thought, well, I'll get some teaching experience. And that's when I decided to go to Thailand to teach English. The plan was to do it for a few months, get some teaching experience, and then go back and maybe do the educational psychology. But I ended up staying there 4 years, as you do. And then thought, okay, actually, maybe teaching is for me, and teaching English specifically. I really enjoyed that. And that's where it all started, really.
So did you get a qualification like CELTA, or do you also have a Delta?
Yes, good point. Yeah, so after I graduated in 2006, that's when I did my CELTA. So that's the standard course that lots of people do when they're going to teach overseas. I actually did that in the UK, in Manchester, before I went to Thailand. And then after teaching for a few years, that's when I was thinking, right, this isn't just a short-term thing. I want to do this seriously and progress more in my career. And that's when, after my time in Thailand, I decided to move back to the UK and I studied applied linguistics, but with a focus on TEFL teaching and teaching English as a foreign language and a second language. So yeah, that's
Yes.
the qualifications. I came back to the UK, did that, and I loved it. When I studied psychology at my undergraduate course, it was very general. There was all these theories about different things, and I found it quite frustrating, actually. But going back and then studying when I'm actually applying what I'm learning to something practical, I really enjoyed that. So applying all these theories, especially related to psychology, I really enjoyed that. To the teaching process, that's what I really enjoyed.
Something that you do a bit differently is that you also have a qualification in NLP. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Okay, so NLP, it's not quite NLP, it's neuro language coaching, which is something slightly different. So it uses elements from NLP, but it's really focused on teaching languages. So I suppose this is where my story goes from there. So when I did my master's, so I did my master's in applied linguistics, taught in Japan for a while, and then I was back in the UK for family reasons. I had family that were getting older. I wanted to be here. So that's when I started teaching in language schools. So teaching people from many different countries in the UK. I worked a little bit in universities, so helping people prepare with academic English. But I don't know if you've ever taught in a language school in the UK, the pay's not fantastic, not treated that well. And the jobs in universities are generally short-term, over the summer. Maybe you could get some short-term contracts here and there. So it's quite difficult to be an English teacher in the UK. And, I actually got to the point where I was thinking, is this really for me? The pay is terrible. It's expensive to live in the UK. And that's when I was looking at doing different things. And actually, before I got my neuro language coaching, that's actually quite a recent thing. I had a business. You might not know about this. I had a business partner. This is someone who I worked with in a language school. We were so frustrated, not getting paid enough. We thought, okay, we'll start our own business. And we decided to work with companies in the UK. We were based in Manchester, and there's a lot of manufacturing in Manchester and a lot of staff from overseas who are working there. So we were actually going in and teaching general English courses, really, because there's, it's sometimes quite difficult, even though they're working in the UK, it's quite difficult to improve your language skills when everyone you're working with speaks your first language too. So we were going in and helping support them. This is sort of the background of why I wanted to start working with expats, because when I worked there, it's a totally different thing. It's not like teaching people who come to study in the UK for a while, want to improve their English so they can get a better job when they go back home. It's changing everything, adapting to the culture, to life in the UK, building relationships with people, feeling part of the community, whether that's at work or when they're back at home as well. So I really, really enjoyed that. And that's sort of the basis, really, of my own business. So we did that for a while, a couple of years, I think till about 2018, when we decided to go our separate ways. So it worked really well for a while. I would never have done it, actually, without my business partner, because he was the kind of person who was like, let's just do it. Let's just do it. It doesn't matter if we don't know how to do it. Let's just do it. Whereas I'm more cautious and think, okay, we need to be prepared. So I learned a lot about business and putting myself out there through that experience. And, we parted ways in the end. He wanted to do something different. So then I was alone on my own thinking, what do I do? I wanted to carry on working with companies because I found that to be really valuable. And I have to say, going back to getting paid, not very good pay in language schools, trying to find ways that I could make a good living from doing what I love doing, because I loved helping these people. I love teaching English. I love helping people to feel more at home living in the UK as well. And I think that probably comes from living overseas myself, coming back to the UK and actually not feeling part of the UK, which is really weird, maybe.
What I wanted to ask you is, how did you approach companies? So let's say someone is very good at teaching, they like teaching business. Let's say they have some students who want to learn business English. They do get a bit of an experience and then they think, well, okay, maybe I should approach companies. How did you do that?
Good question. The very first client that we ever got was actually through cold calling. Now, I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. It's probably the scariest thing I've ever done, is actually just call up a company. But we didn't just call, we did our research first. So the very first company we worked with was a clothes manufacturer based in Salford. They make very expensive designer clothes in an old traditional factory. But 90% of the staff were from overseas, because it's a dying art, clothes making in the UK. The only British people that work there are probably over 50 at least. So we called up, and it just so happened they were looking for an English teacher. So one of the staff members had said, oh, I'd really love to improve my English. Can you find any courses for us? So that was actually one of the staff members who decided to do that. So I have to say, it was like divine timing at that moment that we called up and it just seemed to happen. But then it gave us that motivation, like, okay, there's something needed here. We have companies who are willing to invest because they can see how beneficial it is to their staff and then to the company as well. So that was kind of proof of concept. And then after that, it was all about networking. I think networking is so important. So we'd go to business networking events. We joined the Chamber of Commerce, the local Chamber of Commerce in Manchester. And it doesn't happen overnight. But when you build these relationships with other business people, with other coaches or consultants who are working with the kind of companies we wanted to work with, this is when you find those opportunities. Networking was, and some of the networking that I did back then, so it was around 2015, I still have people recommending today. So we've kept in contact from LinkedIn. It's amazing. It's like planting these seeds with networking, and you're not going to get results overnight, but it's so important to build the connections.
So you mentioned LinkedIn. Is that the platform where you are present, or which social platforms do you use?
Yeah, well, I'm in the process of sort of changing my focus at the moment. So I always went with LinkedIn first because we were working with businesses. That was always first and foremost, working with the businesses. That's where business people hang out. That's where even just having a profile explaining exactly what you do, people find you through the search function, even if they're not reading your posts every day. So I'd really recommend LinkedIn for that. Currently, I've been using LinkedIn mostly aiming at businesses because my company now, I work with businesses and individuals. So I decided that Facebook was going to be marketing to individuals and really that personal approach on Facebook. And then LinkedIn was marketing to the businesses. However, now I'm wondering if I can do a bit of both on LinkedIn because both kinds of clients, hang out on LinkedIn. So I'm in that process now. But I definitely recommend LinkedIn, especially if you want to teach business English, or like me, it's not necessarily business English, but I'm helping people who are working in the UK. So English for work comes first, even if it's other aspects of their English that they want to improve as well.
So I know you also have the English Cafe.
I do have the English Cafe, yes. So when I've been working with people one-to-one, so I work a lot with people one-to-one who have come to work in the UK. I often work with engineers, seems to be the most common, even people working in education who have a really good level of English, but they just either they don't feel confident using it at work, or they have certain blocks, or they want to develop certain skills like presentation skills or networking skills, those kind of things. And I have one-to-one programs and it's great and they feel confident and we make a lot of progress. They feel more confident going into workplaces, things like that, but they want to continue. And most people want to find places that they can practice using English. And I think that's probably true of everyone. You have English classes and that's fine, but it's finding opportunities to speak face-to-face with people and actually use the language that you've learned. And after the pandemic as well, I found lots of my clients were actually working remotely. They weren't even going into the workplace. So one lady that I worked with last year, she'd been working for a company for 2 years. There was an option to go into the office, but she rarely did. And she hardly knew any of her colleagues. So it's a difficult situation that's made even harder because of that working remotely as well. I decided to start the English Cafe. It's not an English class of any sort. It's kind of networking or socializing online. So I do it through the platform Meetup. We meet once a week. Anyone's welcome to join. Mostly people who have come to work in the UK. And it's an opportunity to meet each other and to practice just using English and having those conversations and pushing their language to talk about things that they've never talked about before. So we do have a topic each week to give guidance, but often people will go into breakout rooms and they have one-to-one conversations. Often they'll talk about something completely different. And it's turned into something more than just practicing conversation. It's sharing their experiences of living in the UK, working here, some of the difficulties that they faced. And I think a problem shared, is a problem halved, as they say. Yeah, it's been great. And my plan for this year is to build that more into a paid community. We have the community there already where people can socialize, get to know each other, builds that trust. I mean, it's been good for me because then people trust me and have worked with me one-to-one. But I want to give that option of paying monthly and getting the next level. So having some online courses, online lessons, but also getting more feedback and having more practice sessions with feedback as well. That's an exciting development for this year as well.
Yeah, it is. So you've mentioned a one-to-one. Is this what you like doing, working one-to-one and at groups, or?
Yes, so I really enjoy working one-to-one and going really deep. And this is where the neuro-language coaching comes in, actually. So we'll circle back.
Yeah.
Because when I first started my business, people were saying, no, one-to-one, there's no money in one-to-one. And especially in English teaching, you know, when you can log on and go on to italki or Cambly and people are charging, what, $10 an hour? You know, it's quite difficult unless you're very specialized to get the money. It always comes back to money, doesn't it?
Yeah.
My initial idea was I was doing English for entrepreneurs. Okay. And I made this online course. The whole idea was to have a group program. They do the online course. And then we'd have group sessions where we practice the skills. I'd give feedback. But to be fair, it was a complete flop. I got some one-to-one clients from it, but they didn't want the course that I'd given them. Some aspects were really useful, but when I dug a little bit deeper, it was different what they wanted. And I went in there with my course saying, this is what people need, this is what people want, without really doing the proper research. So that's when I came back to the drawing board. I was like, okay, I'll have to think about this a bit more and really work with people one-to-one to find out really what it is that they need. And I think anyone going into this, to teaching, I think having that experience of one-to-one and finding the common issues that people have is so valuable as research, really, even if you don't plan to do it long term. And one of the things I found is I was using more of the coaching techniques that I'd had business coaching. So I was applying something of the coaching that I'd had done on me to how I was teaching. And I think part of it came quite naturally to me as well, that kind of coaching style. But then I felt like a fraud. My business is called the English Coach. But I have to say, when I first called myself the English Coach, I wasn't a qualified coach. And then I saw all these people in the coaching industry talking about people calling themselves coaches and they're not coaches. It's like, oh, I'm such a fraud. I'm such a fraud. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get a qualification. So I went online, looked at lots of different kinds of language coaching, but this neuro-language coaching kept coming up. And with my background in psychology, and then I focused a bit on neuroscience when I did my master's degree as well, and how that plays a role in language learning. I was like, oh, this sounds good. It was mid 2021 that I found neuro-language coaching. Even though I've been obviously teaching for a while and had lots of experience at that time. And it was one of the best things that I ever did. There's lots of things. Basically, if I explain what neuro-language coaching is, so it takes findings from neuroscience and coaching principles and methods and brings them all together with, you know, traditional language learning methods as well. So in terms of the coaching side of things, everything is goal oriented. We dive really deep into exactly what the client needs. In neuro-language coaching, we call it mechanical goals and mastery goals. So it's certain grammar points that they need to focus on, pronunciation points, that's the mechanical side, working of the language. And then on the mastery side is how they need to use the language, whether it's in meetings or giving presentations. But actually diving deep, I realized that most people, or many of my clients, it's not necessarily those skills that I was focusing on in my original course. It was the bits in between. It was making small talk with people at work, or making small talk with potential clients before a meeting, and telling anecdotes about things that have happened to you or business experiences. It's those everyday conversations, but in a British context and at more of a business context as well. I'd always thought that I was a very learner-centered teacher. These are always the things that I did, applied to my classes, but studying neurolanguage coaching, this made me really learner-centered. So everything from the design of the course, zoning in on exactly what the client wants to improve, and then designing a course around that, and setting specific goals that they can work towards and improve along the way, and reflect, see where they've come from as well. Because I think unless you're working towards like an exam, like when I was teaching IELTS, there's a clear goal at the end of it. But when people come to you, it's like, I just want to improve my business English, you can lose track of where you want to go with that. So having these clear defined goals and having an aim of what they want to do at work or in their business, and then really breaking that down, and breaking it down in a way that feels comfortable for them, has been really, really useful. And other coaching methods that we use is, I'm an introvert at heart. Was a naturally shy person. So particularly in my one-to-one sessions, I've always been more of a listener than a speaker. And in my mind, I think, oh, this isn't good, this isn't the right thing. But the basis of neurolanguage coaching is, it's better to be a listener and let your client lead and lead the way. And you're literally there just to facilitate and guide them to find their way and to be in control. Everything is based around that. And even down to the activities that we do in the sessions is all based on exactly what they need, what works for them. Because I'm not working with beginners, I'm working with people who've been learning English for many years, but still have these blocks. So, they've learned the present perfect. Now, when people come to me for one-to-one sessions, they're looking for something different because they've done all the language classes, they've studied English at school, they've done language classes in the UK, they've got the qualifications often, maybe IELTS, but still they don't feel confident. And so me explaining the present perfect, for example, again and again, or it's not really helpful for them. We need to go deeper. And that's where neurolanguage coaching, it really does go deeper. So as well as on what you're focused on and the language that they need to improve, a lot of it's about mindset and anxieties around language learning as well. And I think this resonated with me because I'm not the most natural language learner myself. When I went to Thailand, well, I'd studied French at school. I was quite good at French, but I didn't use it. When I went to Thailand, I was learning in a completely different way. I was learning to communicate first and foremost, not to pass an exam. So it was a different way of learning. But at the same time, I had so many hang-ups. I was so worried about making mistakes. I was being more introverted. It was easier sometimes to stay quiet and listen rather than say what I really wanted to say. I think being a perfectionist as well, perfectionist is not a good thing. This is a bad thing. It holds you back. And when you're learning languages, getting out there, using it, making mistakes is when you learn and when you progress. So I was probably a really bad language learner and holding myself back in so many ways. And I had to overcome those mindset blocks and those barriers and my own identity as well, as maybe I'm no good at languages really. And having that belief in my mind probably stopped me from progressing as quickly as I could. So I think that experience and then relating that to my own clients, particularly clients who are so good. They know all the grammar. they actually speak really, really well, but there's something blocking them. And often it's that confidence and the reluctance to put yourself out there and to be worried about the judgment of other people, particularly in the UK as well. I think we can say people don't judge you, but people do. And I think people are scared, particularly with the political situation, not feeling good enough at work, especially if all your colleagues are native English speakers. There's so many extra things when you're an expat living in the UK with native speakers as well. Whereas neurolanguage coaching tackles that. We dig deeper, and that's what I really like. So it's all about keeping the brain calm. So calm in the sessions, not activating that fight or flight response, which so often happens, I think, to people when they're using another language. So in the sessions, keeping it calm, making sure they're in control, asking permission as well. When you ask permission, may we do this, may we do that? It's a very small difference, but rather than telling people what you're going to do, you're asking permission. People feel at ease and they feel more in control of the learning process, and it helps to calm the brain and making those connections as well. And it's sort of diving deep really into the whole lifestyle. I've noticed the power of mindfulness and how that helps. A lot of clients will say, okay, I feel calm in your sessions, I feel confident, but then I go into a meeting and then I just can't do anything. My mind goes blank. And it's that fight or flight response. They know the words, but in that situation, they're worrying so much about saying the right thing that everything shuts down. And that's to do with the brain and the brain processes. But incorporating mindfulness into our routines and even exercise, all these things that help promote learning, but also calming the brain. And at the same time, building that self-concept and that self-confidence so you feel less bothered by other people's reactions to you or elements of you as well. These are all the aspects that we look at in neurolanguage coaching. And I have to say, at the end of last year, at least 3 different people told me that my sessions were like therapy. So it's more than language learning. It's going deep really into people's
Building that confidence also.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to qualify?
The original course is about 3 months. It's quite an intense course. And then you have to do lots of practice hours, and then you do some assess sessions as well. So it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's quite short. However, you have a lot of teaching experience first. And to be qualified, have other language teaching qualifications. But the course is designed for teaching any language. The lady who runs it, she came up with the whole concept. It's called Rachel Paling. She's British, but lived in Spain most of her life and taught many, many different people from different countries and come up with this method. And yeah, that was the starting course to get that initial qualification. And then there's a support group and lots of extra courses that you can do as well.
So you are self-employed, yeah, you have your own business. And would you recommend this to teachers? I know many people are a bit afraid of being freelancers or having their own small businesses. They're afraid they might not get clients. So would you recommend this to teachers? And when during their career should they start? Right after qualifying, after getting their TA or any other qualification? Or when do they transition to being freelancers and having that free time, more money that one wants?
Really good questions. First of all, I would definitely recommend it, but don't be fooled into thinking that it will be easy. It's absolutely not easy, unless you have amazing mentors like yourself. I wish I had a mentor like, particularly somebody who's gone through that teaching English experience, or teaching languages, because it can be quite a different business. The other business models might not always fit onto what we're working with. But I would definitely recommend it because particularly in the UK, there's not great opportunities and there's more freedom, and generally you can charge more, which is also good, you know, being paid what you're worth. And I don't know, in terms of when is the best time, I think it really depends on you and your journey. I don't think anyone's the same. For me, it's been a long journey and I really appreciate all the experience that I've had, definitely. And I've learned so much along the way about myself and about working with different people. You know, I've worked with children and adults, business executives, and that really gives you an overview of how it all works together. But maybe that's not true for everyone. But one thing I would recommend is to do that one-to-one work first.
Yeah.
Because even you come out of your initial qualification, maybe working in a language institute for a while, that's always a positive thing because you learn from other teachers as well. But whatever stage you start your business, I think diving into a group program straight away is not really the best thing to do. From my experience, I think working one-to-one is like market research. And like I said previously, it's finding out what are those common problems of that specific client that you're looking to help. The clients that I was teaching in universities, but when the students I was teaching in universities is quite different to an expat working in the UK. They have different priorities, they have different needs. So actually finding the client you want to work with or letting them find you and then diving deep with those one-to-ones, then you're better able to make a more effective group program or standalone online course. How do you feel about that? What do you think? I'm interested because I think you were freelance quite soon, right? You were working self-employed after qualifying.
I've actually been self-employed, or let's say freelance or business owner, whatever,
Yeah.
most of my professional life.
Yeah.
So I was 25 when I started my language school, when I opened my language school back in my country. And I was thinking now that I started at the same time with groups and one-to-one, but I didn't know what I was doing. I remember my secretary back then in 2009, she had won an online English course, which I actually took and rewrote a bit and used it for my first group, but I really didn't know what I was doing. And then I also had the one-to-ones, and they had a bit more specific needs. I think I had a bit more control over the group because I had to do something general for everyone, but for the one-to-ones, I really had to understand their needs. So that actually helped. From 2009 until I moved to the UK in 2017, I worked with groups and one-to-one. But when I moved to the UK, I closed my business back in Romania and I moved to the UK. I started teaching one-to-one, and for a lot of time, for about 3 years, I think, I actually advertised myself as only working one-to-one. And I was that teacher saying, you know, you go and you work in groups, but you don't get results. Come and work one-to-one with me. And in 2021, in October 2021, I actually transitioned from one-to-one to groups. So now I mostly do groups, and I just have some one-to-one sessions, but very short sessions for some of my students. Now, when you work one-to-one, you learn a lot about your students and their needs. And I was able to create my whole course from that experience. So when I had to transition to groups, I took all my one-to-one students and I told them from next month we are going to work in groups. And they were like, what? But we never signed up for this. But if you have a good program and you're well organized and you know what they need, no one said no. They were not very happy at the beginning. We did have 1 week to see if it was okay for them. They were okay in the end. What I also realized when I moved from one-to-one to groups is, as you said, with English Cafe, for example, they were alone.
Yeah.
So they really trusted me and they really wanted to work with me and learn. But when we went to the community and when they met each other, they created friendships. They call each other, they used to support one another. They, if one of them was not present in class, someone would just send them a message, where are you, why aren't you doing your homework, why aren't you here? When you have a lot of one-to-one students, that's when it needs to happen, first of all. So I had too many students. I used to work from 8 in the morning to 5,
Mm.
Monday to Saturday, and also Sunday, and I didn't have a life. And I said, well, I'm glad I have all these students, but I I want the life.
Yeah, yeah.
That's when I did training to learn how to do this, how to build online courses. So I have all my theoretical aspects online in the platform, and in the classroom we just do practice. But you need to know what to have online and
Okay.
what to teach in class. So that's when I transitioned to groups, and I also kept some one-to-one sessions for advanced levels, because I teach for a specific exam. So they have role plays in the exam and they need a
Mm.
partner for that role play. That's why I have them. Now, when you move from one to groups, and then, for example, let's say you really like teaching one and you want to go back to that, you can go back at an increased price. So I remember when I started teaching in the UK, my first one session was £20. That was 80 minutes. Then it increased to 25 after a few months. Then it increased to 30. And then I moved on to groups. And now something else I don't normally recommend would be to sell by session. So I had a price for me,
Yeah.
but I used to sell a certain number of sessions. Now I sell a program. So you have this grammar, this vocabulary, this thing, and the live sessions. Then you can increase your price after you've been validated by one-to-one and groups. So many people have worked with you, then you can go back to one-to-one and have increased prices. But I don't want to do one-to-one. I like it. That's what I like the most, really. I like working one-to-one, but I don't want to go back to the time when I didn't have a life. I don't want to go back there.
Absolutely. No, I can totally relate to that. And also, I think the quality of your sessions goes down when you're teaching 6 one-to-one sessions a day, back to back. There's only so much you can do to prepare, only so much energy you can put into those sessions. So it makes sense when I do one-to-one, but I don't do many throughout the week. I don't have a day packed. Usually two one-to-one sessions at the most a day is what my limit is. And then I have groups in the businesses that I work with. But yeah, it makes it, I think one-to-one is good to a starting place, doing your market research, then getting your group program up and running, and then you can charge more for one-to-one. But there's more value in that hour or that program as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I think the same. And now, as you know, I'm transitioning to online programs because we're starting 2023, and I was thinking, what do I want to do this year? And Rebecca, my daughter, she was a bit sick and had to stay at home. And I said, this year, I would like to have her at home all the time and I can teach her so she can be home educated, homeschooled. In order to do that, what do I have to do, or what do I want to do, and what do I like doing? That's also something very important. And I came up with, you know what? I actually like creating self-study materials, like the planner I've just created. And after I had that published, I was like, now I actually know what I'm going to publish next. Because, if you have a program with recorded videos, you can take them, take the transcript, and that's the book.
There you go.
Yeah. It's very easy. If you haven't started doing this, record all your sessions, because this is going to be very useful. That's what I'm going now. I'm going to try and create a bit more self-study materials with guidance, monitoring, one-to-one sessions or group sessions. These are going to come with those materials, but the focus is going to be to free a bit more time and work with more teachers.
Great. It sounds like an amazing plan. And I think it's so important to work the business around your life as well. At the beginning, that's not always going to be possible. Obviously, you have to put a lot of energy in the beginning to get established and to find an audience and to really find who your client is. You know, it's only really been in the last year where the right people are finding me, particularly for the one-to-one sessions. But in the long term, you work for yourself because you want more free time and you want to be more flexible. So it makes sense to have that long-term plan to fit around your lifestyle to give you that free time to do all the things you want to do. We're all in the process, though. I'm in the process too. And by no means where I want to be. However, building the foundations and getting to this point, I know where I want to go now and how I want to cut down the one-to-ones, do more group, have my community and expand that community more as well. So
Yes.
okay.
Now I have the membership for my English language students, and it's not that I don't truly believe you can have a membership for English language students, but I think depending on goal, like what you want to do would be something that they would want to be there because of the community networking and language. The membership I have is for an exam, preparing for an exam. So once they pass the exam, they don't need to be members of that membership. I think the teachers community is a much better idea because again, it's networking, community. If anyone wants to have a membership, they should focus on those things first. Yes, you teach them something, but you also need to ensure that networking and community component is there. People want to stay in.
Definitely. And my plan as well is to keep working with the companies because I thought, oh, I won't do that in the long term, but I actually really enjoy it. And I think it gives me more authority when I'm working with individuals as well, because I know from the inside what companies want, the problems that the staff have. That really helps inform when I'm doing my one-to-one and the group programs as well. We'll see. Probably more online self-study materials aimed at the businesses with a few short courses or workshops face-to-face, and then see how that feeds into one-to-one. This year, 2003 is going to be about growing more and seeing how these two aspects of my business can come together.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking that we are at a level where we have this possibility to be flexible and to try things out. When you're just starting out, you just want to find clients, you just
Yeah,
want to find students, and I think it can be very frustrating to find people. Where do you get them? How do you get them? How do they trust you? Because they don't know you. And starting in a school is a very good idea. I actually started in a school, but it was my school. But when I started my business, I was in a very good place and time, let's say, because it was the recession in 2009. And being in an Eastern European country, not very rich, people wanted to go abroad. So I opened my language school right when people needed to learn a language and move abroad. So that really helped.
timing.
But
Timing is really important as
yes,
well,
timing
isn't
is
it?
very, very important. Yeah. So thank you for this interview today. It was lovely learning more about you and about an established teacher.
Thanks for having
And
me.
I
Lovely
hope
to be
to
here.
have a chat soon again, because I would like to learn a bit more about teaching business English. And I think our listeners would also love that.
Great, excellent. Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more of your podcast as well.
Thank you.